of Chia Network, and he's just going to run through a bunch of things with us. And hopefully, there might be a way that our community and Chia can work together. You guys probably noticed there's a lot of people in our community that are playing on Chia, but not many people really understand why. So I brought the CEO here with me today to run through it. So do you want to start with just what is the Chia Network for people that don't know?
Sure. So Chia Network is a newer layer one blockchain. It is invented by Bram Cohen, who invented BitTorrent. So, Bitcoin named an homage to BitTorrent. We suspect that Satoshi were friends of ours. I'm also a cypherpunk from the late 90s, implemented export controls and cryptography. What Chia is if you took Bitcoin and fixed proof of work to not use much energy but have the same or better security, and you built a smart contracting environment that is in the Bitcoin style, so it's actually secure instead of kind of centralized monolithic smart contracts at Ethereum. That's Chia, and Chia is the most decentralized blockchain ever. We peaked around 400,000 full nodes. We've coasted down to about 100,000 full nodes. Our Nakamoto coefficient's been as high as about 100. It's currently down a little bit, just as some plotting changes, but we expect it to come back up and be in the 50 to 100 range. So that compares with like Bitcoin being 2 and Ethereum being, call it 2 asterisk. So, it's a very different kind of blockchain. And also we're doing one other thing very differently, which is we are, as the Chia Network company, really focused on getting real world adoption from, known entities. So the World Bank has selected us to basically back in the entire voluntary carbon market under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Vera is live in that. The government of Bhutan went live in that, and that is underlying a partnership with the government of Singapore and AIDA. And so we've also been tokenizing carbon on the Chia blockchain and sold some of it to Sumitomo Corporation and Nomura in South America. So, really expect to do a lot of carbon tokenization, but also very relevant in and this is where a lot of the crossovers happen between our communities. We have a very powerful NFT standard. NFTs on Chia enforce royalties to do trustless transactions. Let me say that in a different ways because it's kind of like a whole new concept. It is very similar to partially signed Bitcoin transactions. So it's only kind of Bitcoin and Chia that can do this. But if you make an NFT and you want to sell it for, say, 10 Chia, you can post a signed file that basically is an open offer to anybody who sees it and says, I'll take it. And the person who takes the other side of that just has to spend in the 10 Chia, but the royalty is enforced by the actual smart contract embedded in that signature. And so, like for Chia Friends, which is one of our just kind of demo projects, 3% of every future transaction goes to the Marmot Recovery Foundation in Vancouver, Canada. And so, it's a really interesting way to like turn the model around. In other blockchains, there's a centralized market that you like give custody to your NFTs to. There is no central market in Chia. There are certainly central places to look for where these offers get posted, but ultimately it's truly peer-to-peer in how people trade and transact.
Awesome. Yeah, the NFT community, I have to give accolades to them because they're really strong around Chia. And I know the NFT crowd with us, they really adore Chia Network for their NFTs.
We had some of the team who were very thoughtful on what should an NFT standard have and what were the real deficiencies on the other blockchains. And, with the unique capabilities we have around atomic swaps and offer files, it just really kind of gives a truly peer-to-peer, truly decentralized way for artists and other creators to reach fans, to have ongoing, royalty streams. Ultimately, we even see that kind of creeping into things like gaming, where the original game's digital asset may itself have an ongoing revenue stream when there's a new game, right? It's those kinds of things. And then there's another technology that we have called data layer. And in fact, it's what the Paris Agreement climate accords are using to actually kind of create trust around carbon credits. But it also is very good for a potential way to very decentralized store data and metadata underneath an NFT. One of the cool things we did with our NFT standard is we said, hey, an NFT is a signature, a singleton, and a link to a data element that is fixed. So, it's like this picture, this piece of art, this title. But the source of where that piece of data comes from is kind of malleable. It's like the people keep their, IPFS bill paid. And so what we've made it is that the owner of an NFT, because by the way, difference between kind of the Ethereum model and us, as an artist, when you create an NFT, you currently have control of it. And when you sell it, you lose custody of it. the new owner has the ability to like add an additional URL where you might find the underlying data. And as long as that data element matches the original data element bit for bit, then the NFT remains valid, right? And it's a long way to getting to the data layer technology that the climate stuff is using is also a way to create these massively decentralized data stores. So you can create your NFTs, but then host your NFTs in data layer, which is again hosted meta on top of the Chia blockchain, and then point it at mirrors. And so the idea is that anybody who like owns a part of a collection might mirror the entire collection and publish that off their desktop. And you can find that on chain. And as a either owner of NFT, you could find either the original artist's mirror, a backup mirror from a fan, a just volunteer mirror. And some of the community are working on ways to actually make it so that mirroring might be something you get compensated for as well.
Awesome. I personally love the atomic swap side of things because I really thought last cycle atomic swaps were going to become something that were really well adopted, and they just kind of disappeared. Yeah, so I think atomic swaps and doing it through a smart contract based type of thing versus always doing it through a centralized entity like the NFT marketplaces, it just removes that central entity, the counterparty, and all the different middlemen that you can think of, and just go straight back peer to peer. So, I mean, that's the part for me that I think brings so much interest from our community over to Chia as well. The fact that it is peer to peer, because there's so much ethos around our community and just in crypto in general that how do we go back to peer to peer networks instead of having all these different centralized entities that have just inserted themselves in the middle? Like we've become so reliant on them. Like if OpenSea disappeared today and all the other guys, like how would these people transact? And it leads us vulnerable to the sense that like it should always be a way of peer to peer. So, I mean, like I have to give accolades. I think it's really awesome what you guys have built.
Yeah, it should surprise no one that Bram Cohen, who invented BitTorrent, actually built a peer-to-peer network on a blockchain. But look, we think that atomic swaps, we call them offer files, and self-custody done well are like the killer applications of blockchains. Payments are easy; they're native, right? But the ability to then take that payment and be able to do commerce in it, however you define that, 24/7, 365. The only counterparty risk is your counterparty itself, if that makes any sense. And even there, you can inspect, like if you're about to sell your NFT, does that coin really exist? And your smart contract won't go through for the buyer if the coin doesn't actually transfer. And I mean, it gets kind of crazy. And this is a not yet implemented, but not hypothetical example. Japan can propose to Bhutan that, hey, if you make this change in your carbon registry, we'll make this change in our carbon registry. And here's $1 million of the stable coin to incent you to do that. And they just literally email that. And, Bhutan looks at it and goes, yeah, that's what we agreed to, or no, and says, here's my counter, right? But all of a sudden now you have trustless, escrowless, peer-to-peer trading between governments, much less people, right? And it just gives you a sense of how powerful that kind of capability really is.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And you guys have a lot of adoption right now in the real world, right? With the carbon credits and all these different things. Do you guys have more down the line, or what's happening in that aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are things blockchains don't do well, and unfortunately, you've heard a lot of those things touted by others. But there are some things it does really, really well. So, like a good example, one of the reasons why the Paris Agreement needed to be on a public blockchain is that the idea here was that each of the governments and each of the private registries, so Japan, Mexico, Bhutan, Costa Rica, Vera, Gold Standard, ACR. If you know anything about that sector, those are names that matter, right? Well, if you're trying to get all 270 nations to agree to something, whoever has root to your database is the nation that you now have to figure out which nations hate them, because every nation has a nation they don't like. And with the blockchain, it's a much more credible thing to say that, like, even though like Singapore is doing tech support for this project, right? The countries that aren't real happy with Singapore can't stop them from fully participating, publishing their information, and being part of the trust network. And on the other side of it, a rogue nation that's publishing their data and saying, hey, I'm double printing carbon is going to be seen, obviously. And so it actually kind of creates a natural enforcement mechanism where there's no way like international law could do that. But the other categories, we do a lot of things like loan finance. We think there are real opportunities in especially bank-to-bank payments. Some of our customers are from the future customers are from luxury goods. There's a couple different use cases where it's really in some ways title that is very interesting. So the idea being, did you get a counterfeit bag or did you actually get the right bag? And some of our kind of advanced capabilities around clawbacks and custody mean that like you could really roll out a thing where if you bought a you know name brand bag, it has an NFT, and you need to transfer the NFT when you sell it. And if you don't, there's a way that the original bag manufacturer can go and like it might take 2 weeks, so that they can't do this if you still do own the bag. But if like the person you bought it from didn't do it right, you can go through a process to go get that NFT, right? And that's the kind of stuff that in the real world there's real value. Like a lot of these goods, like cars, motorcycles, internationally we have title for them. Like governments figured out how to do that, and the title matters. But then there's this category of stuff like high performance bikes, two-wheel pedal bikes, right, which are worth like $5,000, and people steal them and move them in countries. And it'd be really neat if you could basically make it that if you're buying one of these and you don't get the NFT title, then you don't believe you're actually buying a unstolen bike, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really cool. I think like one of the biggest things with blockchain is like, how do we bring the real world and all these different things on chain and get adoption and cater for them? So I think it's really awesome to see that Chia is taking the steps to do that.
Yeah, I was just saying, I don't want to overemphasize that side of it, because I don't want people to walk away thinking that like there's not a hilarious group of DJs doing crazy stuff, and there's also not beautiful artwork on the Chia blockchain, right? Like there's really cool stuff going on. But we knew that there needed to be social proof. There's all this promise of what blockchains are going to bring, and it is inevitable. It really will do that. But for different reasons, both Bitcoin and Ethereum clones, and those things are kind of an Ethereum clone, weren't ready for prime time for other people's money. If you were going to be the CIO of a major U.S. bank, you did not want to have to go explain to the CEO of the bank why you lost $100 million to the North Koreans due to a Solidity reentrancy bug. Like that just was not acceptable. And you wanted smart contracting and Bitcoin's capabilities, but you can't handle the ESG negatives that might come with. But you really want smart contracting, and that's not there yet, right? So we really set out to build something that was credible for other people's money. And the World Bank and the IFC are putting other people's money at risk on the Chia blockchain. And we wanted to then also go out and add the ability for us to kind of prove socially to people who don't understand this technology, hey, your local bank uses this for day-to-day operations. You might use this to raise money legitimately. You may actually, do Kickstarters this way, right? There's all sorts of things where, as well-known name brand entities actually use blockchains for things they're good at. We can kind of get past this. It's all scams and spam and degenerates mocking, cookie coin. Sorry, cookies.
Yeah, sorry, cookies. But I mean, at the same time, if it wasn't for people like cookies and that, like I personally wouldn't have paid as much attention to Chia. So one of the biggest things that hit me was finding out how many nodes are actually running in your network. I thought it was quite astounding. It speaks volumes for your community adoption and people wanting to get behind peer-to-peer, like going back to ethos of blockchain again, like the peak of 400,000 different nodes in your network. Like that's astonishing. And I don't think enough people in the space, in crypto as a whole, talked about that, because like, in PulseChain, for instance, like we've hit 50,000 and it's amazing, but every time you hit massive milestones, right? And 400,000 is massive milestone. Even 100,000, you're at like 120,000 right now, aren't you?
I think we're close to like 95,000. That was I looked yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, it's a massive number.
Well, inscriptions hit us too, and so now we are absolutely full blocked, and it's causing some of our lowest power, literally Raspberry Pi 4s, to struggle sometimes to stay online, hence the number. But it gives you a sense of how big it is. I mean, we've got literally a farmer in Antarctica.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's next
all 7
level.
continents. Yep.
But I think one of the biggest thing that is drawing attention to Chia right now for our community is your future gateway that you're building, right? To do with the data layer. So do you want to
Yeah.
dive into that and what it actually means for hosting on Chia?
Sure. So there's a couple of different ways to think about data layer. I like to say it's a federated database. So the idea is that you have kind of a unified database, but everybody keeps the data in sync, but only has read-write access to their part of it. So, that's kind of how the CAD Trust, which is the Vera project, works. It's like Bhutan has a read-write table. And when it makes an update, Vera sees that and requests the data independently of the blockchain, but can confirm using the blockchain, yeah, that is actually the data that, Bhutan added to its table. And so immediately you get a consistent view of like all the carbon credits in the world. Well, it also is kind of the infrastructure to do almost all that IPFS does except store the data. Instead, what it does is it lets you create a lot of data stores that can be easily monitored on chain. So like an NFT artist makes, one more and turns a set into 1,001 from 1,000. Everybody who mirrors that can automatically see that, verify that it really is the original publisher. It is an update the publisher intended. Download that and republish it in a way everybody else can also confirm that. And so there's a lot of very active development on turning that into things like kind of virtual file systems in Linux and Windows, really giving an ability for arbitrary data. So anything from like NFT art to like a tweet to be able to push out in a very decentralized way, but in a way that's coordinated centrally on a decentralized blockchain. And so you have this kind of neat ability to stay in sync, mirror, be very nimble about where the data actually lives. Because, if it turns out that like, wait, we were using IPFS, for example, and IPS goes down, it's like, well, okay, now we'll point it at an S3 endpoint, right? And it's the same data, it's the same data, and you can confirm to everyone it's the same data. So it's kind of like BitTorrent smeared on a blockchain, though BitTorrent does what it does even better, right? And in fact, there's likely to be some intersection there where one of the endpoints is, here's the torrent for this item that was added to this data layer instance.
Okay, cool. So you obviously know Bullish Ox and those types of people in our community, right? They're pretty close with you. Yeah.
By the way, love them. I never, ever think anything but just like laugh my ass off. Love these guys and gals.
Yeah, they are DJs, but they are absolutely amazing people. Bullish, I always have to give accolades to him. Great guy. So Bullish, for instance, he's planning on hosting front ends for certain applications around PulseChain on Chia network when this comes out, right? Obviously, we ran into some issues with IPFS. I mean, IPFS is great. Like, I like the idea of hash content and its immutability, but obviously it's like not immutable at the same time. You have to pin the content in the network to assure it's there. And then you leave yourself open to other vulnerabilities. Like the hash is very easy to be censored because it's one location, right? So what do you think about people and us, right, our community, hosting these things on the Chia network?
Well, what's so neat about it is that permissionlessly, anyone who wants to can mirror your original mirror. And it's seen on the chain. So in other words, you can automatically, if you care about those mirrors, discover all of those. And, if one doesn't work, you hit IPFS and you get a 404. Then you go, okay, well, let me hit these, public S3 endpoints. Oh, those work. Wait, the hash tells me I'm getting what I expected. Yeah, that's truly integral. I know that the history and the permissions are all right. And, all I need to do if I really want to have, strong data availability is to make sure there are a couple mirrors around, and that could be a high number of mirrors. You can imagine even like in a social network where like everyone who posts also mirrors the entire net. And so you've kind of got this ability to get the data from anywhere.
Awesome. So I'm guessing you don't see it as like a competition type of thing, to anything else.
So, Bram and Zuku from Zcash worked together at a place called Mojo Nation. And Mojo Nation tried to build they didn't know it was a blockchain at the time, but it was pretty close. That was BitTorrent plus a cryptocurrency plus a proof of work plus Filecoin. And the answer is that 2 out of those 3 things you can build. But building what Filecoin really wants to build, we're skeptical that you can kind of really do what you want to do. And, we saw this with Chia. The problem for anybody publishing actual data is that sooner or later, child sexual abuse material gets published on it. And it's an adverse selection problem, right? if you make available public data, the data that's so unpriceable that you're not willing to pay for a cheap hosting option, that's the stuff that gets unnaturally selected for. And so it's a problem about where those final endpoints get. It's one of the things that's nice about data layer is that you're not necessarily subscribing to an arbitrary set of data being published, right? Like if you're a Filecoin provider or a SIA provider, you kind of are. So the whole point there is that we think the actual final storage isn't a problem you kind of solve with a blockchain, but we think making things mutable where they should be and immutable where they shouldn't be really lets people do kind of a defense in depth to things like link rot and the other problems we all really actually have with this stuff. And so when you do that right, now all of a sudden you kind of give artists and fans and communities the ability to go, IPFS is working great. It's going to be the primary way we get this, but we're going to have a backup that's all hosted on like a cheap S3 equivalent. And that way, if something goes bad, we can go grab that later, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to look at it.
Yeah, and you don't have to actually publish the mirror necessarily. In other words, you could absolutely mirror a data layer privately for yourself for like, free in some of the, Amazon cheap layers, so that if you did ever lose it, you could immediately republish it in a way that everyone would be able to reconstruct it from the chain all the way to the last update and have complete confidence that nothing was changed when it, temporarily fell offline.
Awesome. In terms of like the future of Chia, where do you see Chia going this cycle?
This cycle's a hard question, just because is this cycle going to be 2 months or is it going to be 2 years, right? But I think I generally answer the question. How about where do I see Chia in 5, right? And where we see that is I think we're going to be one of the dominant chains for real world assets, and we believe that as you start to see that happen, things like equities and debt, municipal debt, carbon offsets, NFTs, NFTs for real businesses as well. Kind of a mix of degeneracy and like the luxury brands you know and love doing real things with blockchains. So, I certainly expect that we'll be in the top 50 blockchains at some point. We don't really worry too much about that. We're much more worried about getting blocks filled with high value transactions.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, like, I guess some people come out and want to do a big bang and other people are here for the long haul, right?
Bram and I felt like blockchains were these amazing innovations that just hadn't yet been able to get to their promise. And so this very much was a very long-term project of his and mine. And look, we've done some things before, BitTorrent for him, eMusic on the other side of the music business for me. Tony Fidel jokingly calls me the grandfather of the iPod because he worked for me for a while. And then the iPod is actually my internal design that Johnny Ive put a real good UI on. And so, we're back to do this because there's so much promise. And it's, really the promise of it's this truly decentralized piece. It's, we in the West, there are a lot of problems that we don't have because like credit cards kind of work and PayPal kind of works and wires kind of work. And I'm not really honestly too worried about my bank dying, except for when SVB and First Republic died the other day. But, if you live in Argentina or, you live in Venezuela, you live in Beirut, these are not assumptions you get to make. And I think one of the neat opportunities is by kind of driving a lot of investment and adoption from the Western world, we can kind of give the rest of the world the last mile of the rule of law. It's like, I can't completely replace your contract, but like we can make it so your escrow agent can't steal your money and you can actually do a deal from Nairobi to Kenya without having to trust an institution. Like these are, important new capabilities that we can give the world.
Yeah, I think very important, right? It's like we don't just have these problems in crypto of centralized entities and middlemen. It's all around the world, and I think that's a really great point. Like that's why we love blockchains, why CBDCs and everything's coming here. Like it's the ability to transfer funds anywhere around the globe, but doing that trustlessly and peer to peer. Having that type of escrow, like atomic swap style. It's a pivotal point in the future that's coming. So I think it's awesome that you guys are building for the future. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, look, it's a really cool thing to be able to like create an NFT and not know who and or where. Like, you can create an NFT there in Australia, and it could be somebody in I don't know, Alaska buying it, and you wouldn't know nor care. And part of that, that's an easy transaction, right? Western to Western,
Mhm.
not so hard.
Yeah.
But try doing something from Colombia to Bhutan, right?
Yeah.
Those are just really difficult spheres to like actually do commerce against. And so having this like global unified market where no one can screw each other is just a really powerful capability. And it's going to be really exciting to see how far that goes, right? Because it's not just trading NFTs or trading coins or trading and retiring carbon offsets. It's going to be a lot larger than that ultimately.
Key point where people can't screw other people. So there was
Cryptographically tested, right? Like that's the point. You don't have to trust Bram and I.
yes,
You can go audit it yourself.
yeah, the way DeFi is supposed to be.
That's right.
There is a comment, and I just want to ask it just before we move on because it's going back to NFTs. It says, "Does blockchain?" I'm guessing they're meaning Chia, truly possess the capabilities to accommodate the creation, storage, and transfer of billions of NFTs. So I'm guessing he's like asking more, what's the capability of your data layer?
Yeah. So look, the thing that's important about blockchains is the blockchain trilemma is real, and that is that on a layer one blockchain, you can have secure, decentralized, or high transactions per second. You get to choose two. And there are a lot of people out there claiming they've solved that, and they're just basically snowing you because the reality of being decentralized is, you have to assume that you're like on a wireless connection in Africa, and the guy's got like, I don't know, 10 megabits per second. You're not going to be able to move 100,000 TPS over 10 megabits per second on some poor dude's phone, right? So what's going to happen is that various layer twos are going to be the place that you take a trading market or a community up to. And so you'll be able to trade at kind of Web 2 speed. And so there you really can get to global scale and high throughput. Like today, if you look at Bitcoin and Lightning, because it's constrained, if you will, by the feature set of Bitcoin's layer one, can't do that yet. But there's absolutely solutions to how you would do that. It's just you need something like Chia Lisp that Chia has to be able to do that easily. And so, it is that in the kind of Bitcoin style, you actually have better scaling solutions. And, for Bitcoin, if Bitcoin had something like Chia Lisp. For Chia, we have Chia Lisp. And therefore, as we start to scale, we're very confident that we can give people payment channels and rollups and ZK rollups to be able to really, high speed, custom tailored to your community offering, permissionlessly moving around back and forth, making good trade offs of, a layer one transaction ultimately should probably cost you about $10. So there's no way that on a cheap PFP you want to be down on layer one, but you might take all day's trading of PFPs and it's worth $10 to solidify that on the chain tonight.
So you touched on something that I really wanted to ask you about next. Is anybody developing a payment gateway and a payment network on the Chia network? So like when I was checking out you guys like maybe 6 months ago, that was kind of the thing that I was looking at going, somebody should really develop a payment gateway here. Like I feel like Chia is the chain that could actually handle it and effectively do it.
Yeah, so there's kind of two answers to your question, right? There's on ramps and off ramps, and then there's scaling solutions, right?
Yep.
On the on ramps and off ramps, we're about to launch an Ethereum bridge, so you should expect all of the various stable coins to be immediately wrappable. It's going to our community for testing right now, and so a few months of testing, and then we'll make it available. There are some partnerships we're talking to where some semi-traditional financial services companies can kind of all of a sudden have a smart contract capable payment system. It's one of the neat things about how Chia Lisp works is that you actually can integrate it with kind of classic methods, and things like data layer make this possible too, to seamlessly kind of cross between the two. But ultimately, on the scaling solution side, Bram is working on peer-to-peer gaming, and this are games of skill like Wordle or poker, where two people can kind of sign in a state channel, think payment channel. So like put $20 in on each side, and you can play as many rounds of the game as you want in real time at Web 2 speeds. But then when you're done, it takes a minute to settle back out to the blockchain, or you leave it, or it times out, and you can automatically settle it back out. And that's kind of the first major step of giving the core pieces of Lightning working on Chia. It's not all of what you need to do Lightning, but it's a good 40-50% of it. Also, we just released about a quarter ago all the tools needed to build a ZK rollup on Chia. So, to the extent that other people are interested in looking at rollups, that's going to be one of the ways. Also, it turns out that data layer is its own kind of layer too. There are certain ways you can even scale data layer up so that it doesn't make all of the data layer updates directly on chain. Rollups work really well for that because you don't really have to trust that. It's not like money where the sequence matters. It's more like, yeah, an NFT got updated. If my NFT updates after yours when it should have updated before yours, it's unlikely to be a problem unless we're talking about like gaming, right?
Mhm.
So there's real, different ways and different styles of L2s that are very easy to build on Chia that we think are just going to happen as we continue to build, block demand.
Awesome. I really like that Chi is building for the future because, like, when I look at blockchain, I know I can be like a maximalist sometimes on certain chains, right? But like, I really see a multi-chain future in the near future too. Like, I think not really this cycle, I think it could happen too. Right. But moving into the next cycle when bridges get a little bit more developed, I think if we start like leveraging different blockchains for what they're built for and what they're capable of doing, I think that becomes a really seamless world where blockchain actually has the ability to be a dominant thing in like the real world in the space, like get real adoption, get people on board and make it so user friendly. And like I think there's going to be certain developments made over the next few years that are going to make things seamless. Like people are just going to pick up their phone and play with it and not realize that they're interacting with a blockchain, but doing these things decentralized and peer to peer. So I really like what you're doing over at Chia, and I think the solutions that you're coming up with, how it's actually built just as a whole, like your technology, I think it's really awesome. I really look forward to seeing what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you. We spent almost 6 years in true R&D mode. We launched in 17 and didn't launch a blockchain until 21. Yeah. And that was because it took a lot of real design to create a new better proof of work effectively, and really think through what from first principles is a secure smart contracting environment on a real built public
Yeah.
blockchain. I agree partially. I joke that blockchains is a winner take most kind of business, but I think it has a lot to do with different grades of security. Right. I ultimately expect that the Chia blockchain will be relatively expensive to transact on layer one because that's going to be the chain where people are moving, $1 billion bank transfer. But
Mhm.
that security can be inherited by layer twos and other chains that especially kind of root their trust back to the Chia chain, such that like if you're playing a game, you're never gonna pay $10 to like update a virtual item, like, never. But you might want to, you might want to have the entire game's overall economy anchored back down
Yeah.
to the ability that like something bad happens and you roll back 10 minutes and it might take 20 minutes to recover, but whatever hack happened doesn't validate, and therefore it is worth the game provider spending $20
Mhm.
to like sign it down and sign it back up, right?
Yeah. I think you touched on something important again too, the fact that some chains having the ability to roll them back is needed in the future. So I think like your prominent layer ones that are built for security and like those types of things, decentralization versus scalability, I don't think they should be rolled back, right? Like, 'cause I think immutability and the ledger, right? But other chains and other things, I don't mind it in the sense that if you want the whole entire gaming community to adopt blockchain, they have to have some sort of reassurance, right? Because we get the sense that it's a scam and it's this and it's that, and you see all these massive hacks like Axis and all these different things that happen, and millions of dollars get lost, right? That's the barrier entry to mass adoption. So if you can have certain chains that are built for things like gaming and give them that security aspect and give them reassurance that if something really, really bad happened, you can fix it. Like that's how you get mass adoption. And I think that's why a multi-chain future is so important again as well, right? But
Yeah.
like, yeah, you go.
I was going to say, look, when I say self custody, I actually mean self custody and control. And so one of the
Mm,
things we do very differently is the Chia chain is totally immutable. It's just that
mm,
transactions don't have to be immutable. They can
yeah,
be, from smart contract perspective, very well understood. Where like we have what we call typo clawbacks today. So if you send an Ethereum or Bitcoin transaction, you'll send a test transaction to make sure you've got the recipient's address right if the transaction value is high. We have this thing. They're racing to say, hey, look, I want to do a clawback transaction. I can claw this transaction back for the next hour, but I can send it. I can then go reach out to my recipient. My recipient can see that it's inbound, but they don't have it yet. And
mm,
if they say, yeah, I see it, then you can basically just wait for the expiry and spend it immediately, automatically, and only to the correct recipient. So all of a
mm,
sudden now you don't have to do a test spend. Well, that can get even more complex. And we're going to head here where you send it, it is for a period spendable by both. And so all of a sudden you can have the ability to like automatically let it be in the next person's wallet after that period. Or you can also have it be that, you know, if it's spent without like a second signature, there's a 1 hour period during which you can exclusively claw it back. And this is how you stop someone from like grabbing your NFT key, stealing all your NFTs. It's like, well, okay, you got one key, but you don't have the second key. And I keep the second key completely offline. So we're going to make all that stuff much more easy to kind of build and manage. You know, primarily you're going to use your iPhone secure element or later your Android secure element, and then, you know, Ledger and other things too. But like the Ledger may be the device you use to remove your iPhone from your wallet and put a new iPhone in, right? So, you know, there are real ways with good smart contracting that's not kind of in the Ethereum model to build these very human ways to do these transactions, but they're much safer. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm doing a high value transaction. If the counterparty knows it's on the way and they'll get it in an hour, and then, you know, the only person that can take it back is the person I'm buying it from, it's a very different situation, right? It's like, okay, funds are pretty good. I'll wait for the hour. Oh, funds are good, right? And all of a sudden now you just take so many hacks and thefts and accidents out of the equation. We've got to do that. You know, ultimately, you said something critically important, which is success in blockchains is you don't even know you're using them.
Yeah, definitely. I just go a little bit more bullish on Chia because I didn't know you guys had that type of thing. And I've been waiting for it. So like the only bridge hack that I know of that didn't have its exploit go through was the new Rainbow Bridge, because they had a latency in the bridging platform where it, like the transaction wasn't relayed to the other chain, and then that latency ended up being a feature where they could stop the massive exploit. And I was sitting there and I'm like, I wanted bridges to implement that type of thing. Like I know seamless and like you don't want to have to wait for these things, but at some point in time, you know, that was really amazing. And I was sitting there going, I want people to adopt this. Like if they did, exploits are now out the window on bridges. So
that's right. Right.
That's really awesome.
So I don't know if our bridge is going to have the best version of that on its very first iteration, but it's exactly the kind of thing that's very easy to do, because, you know, you could absolutely make it so that there's always a 30-minute delay before the funds are truly good. But the thing is the recipient, you know, they're there, and the only people who can mess with you are the owners of the bridge, right? And you know that timer is ticking, and as soon as that timer's over, they can't mess with you. Like that's actually, you know, people don't know that in the behind the scenes banks are doing that for them. You know, they're slowing certain transactions down, they're double checking it. You know, the thing is, it's making it explicit and also making it configurable. So you can actually sit there and go, you know, not every NFT needs an hour clawback because not every NFT is worth $33,000, right? You know, but, you know, you can now start to say, hey, look, I've got a wallet, and if the thing is worth more than X, it's going to require 2 signatures. But if it's worth less than X, it only requires 1. You know, those kinds of things.
I think these types of topics can sometimes be a little bit controversial to some people, but like for me, I think it's the pivotal part to how we evolve in blockchain, how we get the mass adoption. So, I mean, I think that's really awesome that you guys are working on that. I think,
part of the challenge for people who are skeptical about this is that they've never seen how you might do it. And what I mean by that is like, you know, Ethereum has such a centralized smart contract that like this idea, you know, if you own an NFT in Ethereum, you have an entry in somebody else's smart contract. Right? If you own an NFT in Chia, you actually have unique possession of the coin that is that NFT. And so that makes you able to like layer your rules outside it and around it and change it and modify it for yourself in a way that you couldn't really do with an Ethereum smart contract. You know, Ethereum's making kind of the first steps with account abstraction, but it's not this rich or this capable. And when you do this, and the coin model is much easier for you to inspect, even as an end user. So, like the reason, like we're excited about iOS Signer, is that you got the entire iOS screen to show you what's about to happen in this transaction. So you actually are looking at it, and you know, looking at it at the like, okay, I'm going to transfer this NFT to that address, and this royalty is going to that royalty address. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Yes, right. Compared to like staring at your ledger and like trying to get the first 4 and the last 4 and maybe, and this, you know, is what I'm looking at actually got the contents that I think I'm signing. When you have these better underlying primitives, then you do things like on the receiving side, if you're get sent a clawback, the wallet just needs to tell you, hey, you have good funds coming, They're valid, but you can't spend them yet because you don't have unique control of them yet, right?
Mm.
But when that ends, it goes to your balance, and now you just treat it like you own it because you do. It's those kinds of core UI pieces that can be easily implemented on top of the tech when you have the ability to make this tech work the way it should. And I think that's where
Mm.
a lot of the fear comes from, is that they've never seen how you might do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's understandable. That's a really good take. Um, I did hear that you guys had a few layoffs and a couple of issues around Chia. Is it okay if you want to touch on that?
Sure. I mean, hate the fact that it had to happen. We had to let go some wonderful people, but
Mm.
we had filed for a public offering in April of this current year, and the funding market is abysmal, and our investment bank was Credit Suisse. So when UBS blew up Credit Suisse, we were left a bit in the lurch. So we made
Okay.
some changes. We lowered the burn rate, but we are continuing with a new investment firm on our S1 process. And we have moved to selling very small amounts of coins to sustain the business kind of indefinitely.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, there's always unforeseen things happen, right?
Yeah,
and
we created a pre-farm because we didn't know what the future would hold, and it was very nice to be able to, unlike a startup, we had a real solid solution, and because we launched and built out so very differently, our coin isn't easily considered a security, and so it's a very different situation. We'd never sold coins until relatively 60 days ago. So, our network had been up for 2.5 years before, the entity, if you will, sold anything. We had instead sold equity in a company that we still plan to actually list publicly with, a national market. And we think that's important because, especially, it's kind of two factors. One is it really simplifies our regulatory environment. Having and being a registered company with the SEC means that we have the latitude of a public company, and the
okay.
ability to kind of interact with the SEC in a very different way. When you're an actual public issuer, it's different than them kind of going around to private issuers and all the stuff that kind of goes on in the rest of the crypto world. But then also, when your customers are the World Bank and the IFC and governments and, Fortune 500
Mm.
companies, it's very comforting for them to be able to go to Edgar, which is the where you see company public filings, and see all that
Mhm.
release data and know that you're in a high compliance regulatory environment, and that their vendor is going to be a reliable, safe entity, right? So that's really the
Mm.
major reason we kind of did things differently
Are you happy to go back a tiny bit and touch on why Chia isn't a security, the token itself?
Yeah, so we never sold coins to investors for an investment of money, and to the extent we sold anything, it was after you know millions of coins were issued by farmers to farmers for farming rewards. So the only farming rewards, the only coins in the public market until very recently were only farming rewards, and then it's still 99.5% farming rewards out there. So we it's possible that our regulators could take the position that sales of coins by us are securities, because it's
Mhm.
not that the coin is a security, it's that the transaction is a security. But out of an abundance of caution, we basically made sure we were doing that only under an exemption from the registration statements anyway. So, from that perspective, we think, and some of that is based on our interaction with the SEC, that the SEC takes the position that Chia is not a security. That's not an official position by them. That's our view of what they're saying, to be
Mhm.
very clear. Uh,
Mhm.
and that makes sense. That it turns out that the 2019 guidance is really being followed. And, if you kind of apply the 2019 guidance to the fact that we launched a fully functioning, fully decentralized network where we don't have control, and there's a lot of provable points about we don't. We had a funny moment where Bram, we have chips like BIPs, change proposals, and Bram made a proposal, and the community went no, and it was withdrawn. And so, if there's anybody who had that, unique ability, it would have been Bram, and the answer was the community was like, nah, don't do
Mhm.
it. So that's why we don't think it's a security. But we are careful to make sure that in any transaction we do is otherwise compliant with U.S. law if it were a security too.
Mhm. I think that's really cool what you just touched on though, like the community and how vocal they are and prominent and like interactive, right? Like I think that's the key thing of a successful chain, especially the ones that people don't talk about, but they have really active communities, right? So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
we have about 100,000 full nodes. We probably have about 300,000 farmers, right? Because a lot of farmers are using, pools that don't have multiple nodes and those kinds of things. And so when you look around, there's actually a lot of people that are, both in and care about the community. And then, I got to give Cookies a lot of credit for bringing a lot of folks from your community over in the best ways possible. And that's what we love. It's been interesting. We've adopted some communities we've gone. Originally, Burst Coin was one of the big communities that a lot of our early community came from. We love watching all the Orange GUI stuff and all the Hex folks that are coming across. And, we appreciate the, trust that kind of implies. So.
I think it's awesome seeing our communities work together. Like, I know sometimes it can be a little controversial and whatnot, but, when I see the Tang Gang and Cookies and all of them hanging out with the Chia guys, I've watched for a little while, and I think it's really, really awesome to see two communities come together because you learn and you grow together, right?
Well, and also, there are two types of Digins in the world. There's the high-quality ones and the low-quality ones, and we seem to have a very high-quality crowd. It's funny as heck. I'll just leave it there.
I really love the tech side of crypto and blockchain. I find so many things so fascinating, but you have to love the degens. They are what makes everything fun.
Yep. Yeah, everything from honk to big DID coin.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, some of the names, it's something else. But they make it enjoyable. They put laughter and fun back in it. It's really awesome. And I love seeing that community aspect. And I love when communities come together. I think that is the best thing for me personally that I love to see. Because it's like, if you center yourself and you just isolate yourself, you don't learn and grow and evolve. Where if you join other communities and you chat and you learn from them, you learn their technology, their ways, you evolve together and you better each other. So it's like, I really love those types of things. So
yeah, well, and it's like, it's funny. One of those things is the original folks who did both BRC20 and inscriptions are friends of Bram's who knew what we were doing with NFTs and cats on Chia. And it's been really hilarious to watch that cycle across all the communities and come all the way back around that there's now inscriptions on Chia, which is kind of silly, but amusing nonetheless.
There's a question. Do you guys have any Coinbase listings or any centralized exchange listings?
We do have some. I mean, look, we are not as well listed in the United States as I might like, but it's not due to lack of, being in touch or being taken seriously. It's just these entities are not open about what they make these decisions on. I mean, even like you talk to like a senior VP, they're like, we literally are told we can't talk to the listings team. So, we keep everybody apprised and we continue to expect additional things. Recently Crypto.com enabled US deposits and withdrawals, for example. But, one of the things we're real focused on is alternative easy ways to ramp. So, by the time the bridge is out, the easiest way is going to be to go to Coinbase, buy some USDC, bridge it on, and go into our decentralized market and buy whatever you want, which is great.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, we have that now with our community too, right? Like it is easier. There's another one that's like PulseChain needs a bridge from all blockchains. I don't know if you know, but I'm pretty sure Rubik, that's partnered with Power City, we're trying to connect PulseChain, Ethereum, and Chia together. But do you know of anybody else building? Like, I know you just mentioned the Ethereum to Chia bridge. Do you know any other bridge networks or teams that are looking to link Chia up?
Not right yet, but I do know there's some things out there. What I know is that the first thing we're going to see is going to be the software bridge by us, run by the community.
Yeah, okay. And run by the community. That's cool.
We're not going to run it.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, we want those signers to be people, various people around the world in that community, and it's great having a community like that to start with, right? We really can say, look, there's a European, North American, and an Asian signer on that bridge, and they're people that can write Chia Lisp. Those are the things we want to see.
That's actually really awesome. I love that approach that you guys are taking. Is it like an Omni bridge fork with the validators in it, or what sort of?
It's one of the multi-sig Ethereum wallets, and then it's using kind of custom custody code on our side. And again, we can do some really cool stuff there on our side of it.
Yeah, cool. I look forward to seeing what you build on top of that. I would really love to see somebody do some things with bridging platforms to make them more secure. And after our conversation now, I think you might be one of the leading people to do that. So
yeah, we're always careful with bridges. They're either high trust or no trust, if you know what I'm trying to say. And this requires some trust, but we think that's the the community true multi-sig. Everybody understands it's really a multi-sig. I think that's the best path.
Mhm.
And then, I'll be candid. Our ultimate goal, though, is really to prove to some of the stablecoin issuers that they should be native. So ultimately, just from a
Mhm.
security and other perspective, we'd like to see things like PYUSD, Tether, and USDC on Chia natively.
Okay. Do you guys have any protocols on Chia currently? Yeah, the Chia.
I'm laughing at Monkey Zoo.
Yeah. I was trying not to laugh when I seen it. I was like,
Perfect.
yeah, the DGen side, they make everything fun.
Though Monkey
Do you
Zoo is a
guys
pretty
have
darn
any
good artist too.
protocols?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah? No, you're fine. I've seen some pretty great artists over on Chia, and I know some people in our community have gone and launched collections over there too, so awesome. It's do you have protocols that have native stablecoins currently on Chia, or are you
So we
stablecoinless, I
had
guess you would
Stably.
say?
So we had
Mm-hmm.
Stably USD, but then the Prime Trust bankruptcy, broke Stably for now. They
Yeah.
claim to be back. We'll see. The Cat2 standard is how you issue a fungible token on Chia, and it is a very in-depth capability. It's kind of what inscriptions wish it were ultimately. It's how you would write
Mm-hmm.
a truly secure, like things like Omni on Bitcoin. If you remember those days, way
Okay.
back in the dark ages. The problem with these kinds of coins on Bitcoin is you need a full node to validate whether they're real or not. The thing about the Chia asset token CATs is that you can inspect just it and like one ancestor and know for sure that you got a
Mm-hmm.
legitimate, correct, unforged USDC, USDS, XCH, wrapped Bitcoin, whatever it is, right?
Okay. Do you feel confident that you'll end up with something like USDC on chain? Because I feel like with your connections, the way you guys are going, that it is something that would be happening.
We believe we're going to be one of the destinations for real world assets. And so already, we're seeing demand from real corporations to be able to bridge stable coins onto chain and, buy things like carbon credits for real. So that's a big driver of, interest. And we are close to all the stablecoin providers for obvious reasons.
Yeah, awesome. Is there anything else you want to touch on? I know I've taken up a fair amount of your time already, and I know you're a very busy man, so I appreciate you spending the time and jumping on. But yeah, I
Nothing
do
other
need to let
than
you go.
keep the degeneracy fun during the holidays and happy holidays to everybody.
Do you want to tell everybody where to find you?
I am Hoffman G on X or Twitter, whatever you call it this week, and I hang out on the Chia Discord, which is pretty easy to find on the Chia.net website.
Awesome. And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot, so that was awesome. And yeah, thank you
Yeah,
so
my pleasure.
much.
Thank you. And sorry I missed your DM sooner. We would have been on a couple weeks ago.
It's not a problem at all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.